Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, October 11th meeting of the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can you please confirm we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get started this morning, I would like to ask our interpreter, Leonor Preciado, to walk through how to access our interpretation services for today's meeting. Please proceed.
Sí, por favor, si necesitan equipo de interpretación, esta junta se dará con interpretación en español. Esta junta se llevará en español además, y si necesita interpretación, tienen una intérprete para la junta de esta mañana. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonor. We have confirmed we do have a quorum. And so again, welcome to the October 11 meeting of the iTalk. As always, thank you very much to staff for all their efforts in pulling this meeting together. Thank you to members of the public here in person and online for joining us. Just very quickly talking about how this meeting will work. We will take in-person public comments followed by virtual public comments. And if you're a member of the public here in the room, please submit a speaker slip to the clerk. For those joining us virtually, please continue to raise your virtual hands and you will be called at the appropriate time. Public participation is possible both in person and via Zoom. For today's meeting. I would like now to ask SANDAG's Manager of Financial Programming, Michelle Smith, to provide a quick reminder on how the public and member comments will work for today's meeting. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair Frankel. So as you mentioned, we will take both in-person and virtual public comments. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you'll receive upon registering. When the public comments are called for an item on the Zoom platform, click on the Raise Hand icon in the Zoom toolbar. The chair will call you by name that you provided. If you're participating by telephone, please press *9 and the chair will call you the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. And all comments, whether emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Okay, we'll move into our agenda this morning, beginning with, item 1, which is public comments, communications, and member comments. This is the opportunity for any member of the public joining in person or via Zoom to address the committee on an item not on today's agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one public speaker, the original draw. Give me just a moment to open the mic. Apologies, we're having technical difficulties. All right, there you go. The original draw, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. So, with all the things that we're doing in transportation and these, agendas is to put us into a 15-minute city. And I've told you guys that before, and I don't know if you don't know about it or if you're aware of it, because, what we're doing is we're putting everybody in a densely populated area, and it really doesn't have to do with saving the planet. China is wanting to be like the biggest manufacturer of most of the electric vehicles or fleets of things, even electric bikes. And what they're doing is they're sitting here and producing a bunch of them, thousands of them. And then they wind up, registering them. Some of them may have like 30,000 miles, some of them probably less. But what they're doing is they're putting them in a field or just on a piece of land, and there's thousands of them sitting there. And those are like lithium bombs. I can't imagine what kind of fire that's going to create that won't ever be able to be put out. And then there's also all of these electric bikes that are also piled on top of each other, basically in like landfill areas that they're just filling up this land with that. And, it's just sad because that has nothing to do with saving the planet. It's more of like a game, because as long as they continue to produce them, just like people here. As long as you keep producing them and doing the things that they're asking you to do, you can continue to get money. It doesn't matter if people actually have them and are using them. It's more of a business. And, you know, so it's not really about putting people in those. It's about producing them and then just making it seem like, you know, they're the biggest producer in the world, whether or not people are even in them or not, or they're being just put on a piece of land. And, you know, other countries are also, you know, just making the speed limit so low that it's like 20 miles an hour where people, you might as well want to, you know, walk. And that's the idea, though, is that they want to get people out from their cars, put them on bikes or have them walk places. And I just don't understand how we think that's conducive to the elderly and people who have, you know, children who, you know, need to be like have a van so that they can take their kids where they need to go. I don't think it's smart to be saying they should just be going and riding public transit. And we're spending all of this money for, you know, the cars, like the taxes that people pay to drive, and we're using it for things that have nothing to do with driving. In fact, it's like de-incentivizing people from wanting to drive or being able to drive. And, you know, I just would hope that you guys could really understand what's going on while you're pushing this, because it isn't about what they tell you it's about. And it's just sad that we can, you know, be de-incentivizing and incentivizing people to change their behavior in order to get them to comply. Because if it was good, you wouldn't have to do that.
Thank you. That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you, Francesca. Okay, I'm going to ask at this time if there are any member comments on an item not on today's agenda. Any comments from members? No, I'm seeing none. Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask SANDAG's Director of Financial Planning, Budgets and Grants, Susan Huntington, to provide an agency update. Hi,
Thank
Susan.
you. Thanks. So last week was an eventful week here at SANDAG. We celebrated Clean Air Day with free rides on transit, NEVs, bikes, and scooters, thanks to our transportation partners throughout the region. We hosted a Lawson Rail Realignment Workshop in Del Mar, where over 100 people came to learn and share feedback about the project. We traveled to Tijuana along with over 100 industry leaders from both sides of the border to discuss the 2025 regional plan and align on a common vision for our binational mega region. And then on Friday, we held a joint workshop with members of our transportation, borders, regional planning, and public safety committees to talk about the 2025 regional plan. These regional plan workshops follow a series of community workshops. We're thankful for all the feedback, which will shape the initial concept for the plan that is expected to be brought to the board this winter. This week on Friday, we will bring the amendment to the 2021 regional plan to the board of directors for consideration. At that time, we will hold a public hearing to gather public comments on the amendment and the supplemental environmental impact report. Just a reminder, this amendment does not include a regional road user charge. And then coming up, our team will be visiting community planning groups next month to share more about the airport transit connection study before coming back to the board in November with an update. We're currently rescoping the Blue Line Express study, aiming to rebid that work by early 2024. We continue to make progress on the Purple Line feasibility study to deliver a rail line that is competitive with car travel. The scope of the project was recently amended to focus on a new rail line from National City to Sorrento Mesa, delivering 21 miles of rail. Good news for the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. Assembly Bill 427 has been signed by the governor. This legislation allows us to use the CMGC or Construction Manager General Contractor method to streamline the project. This method will allow us to reduce cost and improve delivery timelines for this important new border crossing. Lastly, and this might be of importance to all of you, next month will mark the 35th anniversary of TransNet. So we have some exciting things planned, so stay tuned. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Susan. Do we have any questions or comments for Susan on the agency report? Pedro, yes.
Susan, on the 2021 revision, you're going to go to the board, and is it a two-step process, a one-step?
So we've taken the 2021 amendment to the board previously and gotten their comments. This is an action item that they approve so that we can submit, we can move forward with the environmental document.
So once you do that, then what happens?
Well, we need to submit the document to the state and then CARB will review the document for consistency.
Okay. Do you have an idea of when CARB may give you their feedback? And what happens if they don't like it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a question. I don't know the answer to how long it's going to take them. When they were reviewing our original final submittal, there was some feedback and it went back and forth. It did take some time to get feedback from them and they did provide comments. So I think it'll be an iterative process. Not sure when we will get our first round of comments back from CARB.
And the last piece, what happens if they don't like it?
We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Susan, it's great to see Free Ride Day occur again. Do we have any data? Do we collect any data about how many people, how many additional rides we see when transit is free for everybody?
I imagine that we can get that information from the transit agencies. Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah, just so that folks know how successful it is. My perception, I see many people. I took the trolley and I saw vastly more people than I typically see. So I think that it's a great program and it'd be great to know, how many extra people took advantage of that. Okay, I think that concludes item 1 and we will move on to our consent agenda.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Would you mind if I made an announcement?
Sure, of course, please.
So I'm pleased to announce that the ITALK Selection Committee met on September 29, 2023 and selected Francisco Rivera to fill the position for licensed architect, civil engineer, or traffic engineer for the term of up to 3 years through May of 2026. Mr. Rivera recently retired from the City of Chula Vista Engineering and Capital Projects Department after working in numerous technical and managerial engineering positions for over 38 years. He has experience with managing TransNet funds and has previously provided presentations to the ITALK over his tenure. During his previous commitments, Mr. Rivera's first ITALK meeting due to previous commitments. He is here today as part of the public to observe. His first ITALK meeting will actually be in January, and we are working with him over the next few months to provide materials on onboarding prior to his first meeting. So we look forward to having him join all of you on the committee, and if you'd like to say a few words.
Good morning, ITALK members of the committee. Thank you. I'm honored to have been selected, and I hope to participate in all the discussions. I'm very familiar with TransNet programs and the policies, and I've contributed many times to many meetings and regional projects. And so I'm grateful to have this opportunity to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rivera, for your interest. And it's great to have a familiar face. I think we all have been involved when you've been here as a presenter. So it'll be wonderful to have you up here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. Great news. We were able to get a quorum and actually select someone. So that's always great. Thank you to all the work. And Zara, I know, worked very hard to try and get a quorum of the selection committee. Thank you, Zara. Okay, now we will move on to our consent agenda. There are 5 items on consent today, only one requiring approval, and that's the approval of the meeting minutes, item 2. So do you have any questions or any items that wish to be pulled from consent?
I have a question on item number 5.
Item number 5, which is the RTIP administrative modification.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll pull item 5. Any others to be pulled? No. Okay, seeing no others. We have Mr. Radcliffe here. Good morning, Richard, and Pedro, please go ahead.
Richard, on the table 1 summary of changes, I was looking over and I see some cost differences. And primarily, it seems to me good news on the city of San Diego's point of view, where they're decreasing their cost, it looks to me. But what happens to that money savings?
So I can't really speak to what they intend to actually do with whatever money they're saving. But I can say that basically in this admin amendment, they were able to I don't know if you can recall, but previously, when we've been bringing the more recent formal amendments to you guys, there's been a negative balance for the city of San Diego. So they actually reduced that substantially. So they actually previously had a negative $16 million balance in their LSI, and they actually were able to adjust their programming by lowering it in some projects, increasing it in others, and they basically now have a positive $16 million balance. So I can't really speak to, like I said, what exactly they're planning to do with the funds that they've reallocated, but they definitely made some good progress in this amendment.
Good to hear. Thank you. No other questions.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Radcliffe on this amendment? No. Thank you so much, Richard. Okay, so I have a motion to approve item 12.
Chair, I'm sorry, before we move on to the vote, can we take the public comments on the consent calendar? please?
Yes, of course, Francesca. Thank you.
The original draw, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. When we're sitting here and spending, like I was, kind of saying before, we're doing things that are, you're increasing capacity of the transportation system and, bike and pedestrian facilities for active transportation. You're putting in traffic controls and traffic circles. But none of this is making it, easier for people to commute and to be driving. And we're using the money that comes from spent on driving to, and a gas car to, fund all of these other things while the roads suffer and, they're not in good condition. And so it's just sad to see that we can, use this to fund a whole other way of life when, what you're using it to fund it for should be going to help all of those different things that are going on, not make it more difficult for people to drive, like in a roundabout, or taking lanes away, and giving them to pedestrians and bikers. It's just I just find it negligent that we can sit and do this and act like there's nothing wrong with it, because it is literally pushing everybody into this new way of life. And even if this road usage charge has been taken out, which, like you said, that it's still, this plan has to still be approved. And so it has to be funded in some way. And they're going to bring, a charge down the pipe, whether it be, you guys are going to create more toll roads or whatever. Like, what is it going to be like on Wednesdays and Thursdays? You can drive if you have this number of license plate, like they've done it in Europe before. It's just terrifying to see all this money being spent for things that, it's not even saving the planet. They have to bury windmill blades because they can't recycle them. And so they're just putting them in the earth. It's like everything that we're doing that is supposedly saving the planet is literally destroying it. But as long as we keep, telling people that we have to do that and it's going to make things better, then, they're going to believe what you're saying. But all you have to do is really just go do some research and see all the, electric vehicles are literally, and even solar and the windmill, all of that has to use your GHGs that you want to save. And, you have to use oil and gas and tractors and, tons of water. And when you're mining for these things, it's toxic to the earth and to the people that are doing it. And there's children that are mining for these minerals, just so that we can, push this new way of life. So I don't know. It's just really sad that, it's the kind of in lockstep with everybody, go along to get along. Nobody wants to, rock the boat, but it's time we rock the boat, because, what's happening is under false pretenses and people need the truth.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That does conclude the public comments on these items.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Okay, do I have a motion to approve item number 2 on the consent agenda?
You guys.
Okay, we have a motion by Sunny. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Pedro. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you very much. For Biology Environmental, Lorian Alquist. Approve. For CEO Private Sector, Sunny House. Approved. For Contractor Construction, Vice Chair Urso Delgado.
Yes.
For finance budgeting, Miriam Babaki.
Yes.
Licensed civil traffic engineer is vacant. For licensed engineer, Les Hopper.
Approved.
And for real estate right-of-way acquisition, Chair Frankel.
Yes.
That item does pass unanimously with those members present.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to item number 7 on today's agenda, which is the regional safety program updates. And this is going to be presented by Sam Sanford and Marissa Manjan. Sam, good morning. Marissa.
Good morning, iTalk. It's a pleasure to be back here and see some familiar faces. And this item actually is kind of coming full circle, coming back to iTalk. And so today we're talking about 2 related planning efforts, a Vision Zero action plan, which is a comprehensive safety action plan, and a regional active transportation plan update. And so I do want to take the first few slides to kind of go over how this came full circle. So with the last 2 triennial performance audit recommendations, there have been safety recommendations for SANDAG staff to look more into safety analysis, planning, and data. And iTalk really took this and worked with staff, establishing a subcommittee on safety and tracking progress and implementation of these recommendations. And from that effort, staff did a survey of local agencies to find out what the safety planning status is throughout our region. And we found that there are some jurisdictions that are doing a wonderful job, have very robust safety programs, but others are struggling in this area. And we were also asked with iTalk's leadership to look at what other MPOs are doing across the nation. Is this a normal area for MPOs to be looking at? And we found that yes, many MPOs are in the safety space. They provide guidance. They can be a repository for data analysis and also at the planning level as well. So from that work, iTalk encouraged staff to seek funding, to seek opportunities for more planning at a regional level in the realm of safety. And we took that message and we went to the Transportation Committee and got a recommendation from the Transportation Committee to develop a resolution looking at really the gold standard of safety planning, which is Vision Zero action plans. That resolution was then taken to the Board of Directors on July 22nd of 2022, and that really directed staff to both seek funding for this planning effort and also to start the process with existing staff time. It also kind of illustrates and outlines some of the basic premises of Vision Zero, that crashes are not inevitable incidents, they are preventable. That's one of the hallmarks of this, and something that's a little bit different than some of the traditional safety elements where sometimes we look at crashes as a cost of using our transportation system, and Vision Zero really rejects that notion. It says, no, this is not an acceptable cost. So if we look at where we want to get to, I never advanced the slide to show the other ones, but these are some of the other bullets that I just spoke through as far as the elements, and we'll speak to these as we go through the 2 plans. So what we're trying to get to with both these efforts is a transportation network where everyone arrives to the destination safe. That's the ultimate goal. The tools that we have within our toolbox to actually achieve these really are the projects, programs, and policies. That's what we have within our toolbox. However, that's going to result in a lot of recommendations. And so we need a way to prioritize, to figure out which ones should move forward quicker, which ones have the best and biggest impact at the lowest cost. And that's where these 2 efforts come in, and they're going to help outline what we should be moving forward with. Now, the 2 of these are being presented together because there is a lot of overlap, a lot of synergy between active transportation, where safety is a critical concern, and then a safety action plan where the focus is purely on safety. There's also a lot of kind of resource or appropriate and good use of resources where there are efforts that overlap. For instance, in engagement, you'll see some elements later when we talk about how we are able to couple those together to get more impactful and insightful engagement and ideas from the public and from stakeholders, and then also the appropriate use of resources. So one of the recommendations that came from the performance audits was to look at data at a regional level and to share this data. And so the planning team and the data science team within SANDAG have been working on this for a while, a data dashboard, and I think we've shown kind of snippets of it in the past. We'll be launching it this fall. And this is the latest iteration, might be slightly changed when it does launch, but this is the latest iteration of what it looks like. But the idea of this is that it'll be a public-facing data dashboard that's pulling information from any crash where an officer arrives on scene and fills out a crash report. Those reports are sent to California Highway Patrol, and then they're put into a larger database that SANDAG then has access to and can present in a more meaningful way than an Excel spreadsheet. And this will be an interactive dashboard where it'll have, as you can see on here, a map feature where people can kind of pan, zoom, and look at incidents of different severity. And then they can also look for trends. You can look at different types of modes, road users, or even contributing factors of different crashes. Now we'll jump into the Vision Zero action plan. We'll take that one first, and then we'll go to the active transportation plan following that. So this is a growing problem, a growing area, an area that unfortunately is trending in the wrong direction. We had been making good strides in the area of safety and traffic safety. However, with the pandemic, the trends reversed. And much of this was due to higher speeds on roadways as we had the stay-at-home orders really nationwide, but for each state, there was less traffic. And because there was less traffic, people felt the need or the ability to drive faster. And that additional speed is from more energy. And when there was a crash, the severity of the injuries were higher. So although there were fewer people on the roadways, there were more fatalities. Now, there was also a thought that, well, maybe when congestion returns and speeds slow down a little bit, we'll see that trend go in the positive direction, which is down. However, in 2022, that didn't pan out. We still saw with return to our new normal of going to work and getting errands done, despite the use of roadways, the number of fatalities was still higher in 2022 than the prior 20 years on record. This is somewhat of an American exceptionalism, and not in a great way, where if we look at other countries and we still control for population or the amount of driving that's done, the US is kind of at the higher end of fatalities. And so this is to show that it doesn't have to be this way, that there are other ways where we can still have a functioning transportation system that is safe. For our county and our state, we see very similar trends. So here we're looking at statewide fatalities, and you can see it's kind of a positive or a growing through the years. It kind of seemed to peak in 2016, 2017, and then in 2020, it started going up again during the pandemic. One of the challenges I would do in a state with safety data is that there is a prolonged period in which we don't have final data. It's about a 2-year wait from when an incident occurs on our roadways to when we have the final report for the state. So that's why the most current available on here is 2020. If we look within our county, because it's a smaller geography, we see a little bit more jumping up and down, some more variability of the data. But if we put a trend line on that, we would still see that positive growth, the number of fatalities growing over time. Now, if we did extend that timeline back even further, we'd see that it was decreasing for a while, but it's been trending in the wrong direction for the last decade or so. So some of the key partners with this effort are the city of Vista and the La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians and Caltrans. So the structure of this is when all the effort was going forward to develop the resolution on Vision Zero, U.S. Department of Transportation also announced a new funding source called Safe Streets and Roads for All, which has both a planning funding and also implementation funding. In order to proceed for implementation funding, you had to have a qualifying safety plan. And it's a pretty high bar. There's a checklist of what a safety plan has to include. Very few jurisdictions in our region had a qualifying plan. So the approach was to develop a region-wide safety plan, this Vision Zero action plan, and then make all jurisdictions and tribes eligible in one fell swoop. And some jurisdictions already have this. They're proceeding wonderfully. This was for other jurisdictions that didn't have this ready to go. At the same time, we were able to partner with the city of Vista and the La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians for them to develop their own local comprehensive safety action plans to kind of demonstrate what that plan would look like. And it's going to get a deeper dive into their specifics of their roadways and come out with more recommendations at a higher level for their region. They're going to kind of identify 10 of their best recommendations. They're going to be further progressed in the planning analysis phase, ready for implementation. Those plans will also be used as templates should other jurisdictions and tribes want to also develop a Vision Zero action plan or a comprehensive safety plan for themselves. And then Caltrans stepped up in a big way to help not only with their expertise, their know-how, and their data that they have access to, but also in matching funds for this federal resource, this competitive grant. So what will we get with this Vision Zero action plan? So a couple of the key deliverables are listed here on the left. First, we'll start off with an existing conditions report. We need to know to start, where are crashes occurring? What are the contributing factors of those crashes? Is there any trends with time, weather, lighting, crash type? So we'll get into those specifics for the entire region. And then with that information, we're going to develop something that's called a high injury network. And this is where we're able to really focus our finite resources where they're going to have the biggest impact. So I have a picture off to the right-hand side of the slide that shows an image from our planning neighbor to the north, the Southern California Association of Governments. They've done this a few times now where they've developed this regional high injury network. And what it is, it's a way to identify what portions of the network are experiencing the highest severity crashes and the most severe crashes. So in the little excerpt on the bottom here, it shows that for the Southern California Association of Governments regional high injury network, 65% of all their fatal and serious injury crashes occur on only 5.5% of their network. So where they have thousands of miles over, I believe it is 5 counties, they're able to focus on 5.5%. Still a large area, but it's better than starting off with all those tens of thousands of miles. So we'll develop a similar approach for this region and bring in all that existing conditions report. That looks at historical crash information. We'll also be looking at more preventative safe systems approach or a systemic approach to safety, where we can look at risk factors to different types of roadway features that might show a potential risk for crashes in the future. And then where we can apply safety solutions that are inexpensive and have high impact in those areas as well. Those will all filter into those safety solution recommendations, and then we'll develop a process for prioritizing those lists of both. I've been talking a lot about projects, but we do want to make sure we're including programs and policies as well. And programs and policies are really critical because they can be implemented quicker than actually building something at a concrete. And depending at the scale, if they're a regional scale or across a city or a jurisdiction, that can have a very profound effect versus the improvement of one intersection, which will definitely help everybody that traverses that intersection. But if it's a policy or program at a jurisdictional level or a regional level, it affects all those that use that entire portion of the network. And then last but not least, those plan templates that I mentioned before that'll be modeled after the City of Vista and the La Jolla Band of Luiseno Indians plans. So that's it for Vision Zero, and I'll turn it over to Marissa.
Thank you, Sam. Take that from you. At the same time that,
Can we take comments first, or do we want to just finish up?
Yeah, let's let Marissa finish the presentation and then we'll do comments. Thank you.
thanks. At the same time that we're developing a Vision Zero action plan, we'll also be working on an update of the regional active transportation plan. So the last time that this plan was developed and adopted by our board was in 2010. The regional network of bikeways is what guides SANDAG with the design and implementation of bike projects that we do in partnership with many of our local jurisdictions and also Caltrans. And because it's been nearly 15 years since the adoption of the last network, we're updating it to refresh it and account for changes that have occurred, because since then we've had 3 different regional plan cycles. There's been changes in the way that we've done planning for our long-range transit, roadway improvements, and we also have to think about how the bikeway connections interact with those. There's a lot of new active transportation opportunities, especially since the pandemic era, regarding how people are maybe choosing to get around on smaller, right-sized, more human-scale devices that are also electrified. So e-bikes, for example, e-cargo bikes, and the opportunity we see for reaching new places in new ways, having a further reach because an electrified device and being able to carry or haul small goods and parcels is really changing the way people may think about getting around within their communities, or especially for trips that are only a few miles long. As we age, 1 in 4 in our population by 2060 are going to be older adult, and we need to think about options for folks who either aren't comfortable or aren't able to drive a car anymore. We need to think about creating facilities that are appropriate for all ages and abilities so everyone feels safe, whether they're on the high injury network or anywhere else in our region. Things that we're keeping in mind as we're going to update the regional active transportation network. The 2021 regional plan that we've recently adopted had for the first time introduced a mobility hub network. So on the map on the left, there's pink blob areas that cover 30 or so communities. Those are our regional mobility hub areas. Those are the locations where we really foresee them being saturated with a lot of transit services, flexible fleet options like on-demand shuttles, and we need to make sure our regional bikeway network connects all of those areas. And so we're going to be taking a look at that. And then the map on the right shows some data regarding shorter trips and higher concentrations of those shorter trip ends. So looking at trips that are under 4 miles, those are real good opportunities for us to think about how active transportation, walking and biking connections could be emphasized, because it's a real opportunity to help encourage folks to shift from maybe driving to using those options, or biking or walking to transit to get to those areas. And you'll see some great overlap between the darker purple-red areas and the regional mobility hub areas. So those are going to be top of mind as we update the regional transportation network. When we talk about a regional bikeway network, we're not treating it any differently than a highway network or a transit network. Someone could hop on the highway for a couple of exits, someone could hop on the bus just for a couple of stops, or they could take it kind of the full route to get to where they need to go. We're thinking in the same exact way when someone is thinking about biking to a community that could be 10 miles away or traveling within their neighborhood for just a short while. So the regional network has to account for safe, both on and off street type of facilities to help encourage and make possible those trips so that they're safe for commutes, and also trips for people going shopping, going to school, social trips. Only 1/3 of our trips are actually for commuting. So there's a real opportunity not only with the short trips, but for the non-commute trips as well, to help encourage folks to use active transportation to get to their destinations. With the plan update, we're going to keep a lot of things in mind. We've kicked off this summer. We're in the process of launching a public outreach update that we'll talk about in a moment, but we're needing to keep in mind the regional mobility hub areas, the changes in some transit investments. The plan over the years, our regional transportation plan has really increased the number of rapid bus services, for example, that we intend to implement throughout the region. And it's an opportunity to think about how we can bundle or co-locate some of these regional bikeway connections with some of those rapid services, while also ensuring all of our regional transit services, rail, light rail and heavy rail, and those rapid services are accessible safely with an active transportation network throughout the region. mentioned already, having to think beyond the work trip for those connections. And we need to get more information from the public and from our local jurisdictions about true major barriers to biking and walking to transit. Safety can be about the full experience, not just about the close proximity to cars or the worry about getting into a crash, but feeling safe because of the experience using a bike or walking in a community, waiting near transit, getting to transit because of their age or the color of their skin or just their lived experience. We need to create, we need to collect and use that information to really identify what's at the crux of preventing someone from considering biking or walking to some of these regional destinations. We're going to be conducting a wide range of public engagement that prioritizes underserved communities, and we got to account for those newer options as I was describing earlier, like e-bikes, trikes, and cargo bikes. We have kind of a new set of updated data that we're going to be looking at, climate, health, equity data, and we need to make sure that the plan takes a fresh look at how we prioritize and phase some of the active transportation projects that are identified in the plan. It's an opportunity to also look at maybe there's some currently adopted local bikeway connections that need to be quote unquote elevated to the regional network. We see the regional bikeway network as an opportunity for shared ownership regarding the design and implementation of the projects. It's not only a SANDAG-led thing, it's done in partnership with local agencies. We may, of course, use TransNet dollars, for example, to incentivize through grant programs the building of some of the facilities, but we need to think about the network in a way that's kind of maybe a little different than before, where it's a collaborative approach to implementing it and getting it done, hopefully much sooner rather than later. I always forget about those images. Next, regarding coordinated community engagement, Sam and I, while developing different plans, are really coming together for a cohesive way to engage the community. So in addition to providing working group and policy advisory group updates like this, we're going to be launching a digital outreach platform that I'll talk about in a moment that would include an interactive map and surveying components. We're going to be doing tens and tens and tens of in-person public events, going to the community with either workshops or pop-up kind of outreach events, getting some support from some of our community-based organizations that we're contracting with to assist us with that outreach. We're going to go hard on social media to really engage folks on what kind of active transportation connections and safety improvements are most important to them. And we've also put together what we're calling a technical advisory group. The interactive online component will really mimic what we've already been doing for the 2025 regional plan. And here's kind of a snip showing the interactive map element from that effort. We're going to do something similar where we can encourage people to leave either general comments regarding safety or active transportation improvements, but also encourage them to kind of pinpoint locations where they feel like a regional network connection is warranted, where there's a location where they currently feel very unsafe and safety needs to be improved. And it's an opportunity for us to kind of pinpoint specific locations. People can add comments, upload their own images, like or dislike other comments that someone else has already added. And it's a lot kind of more interactive than maybe some of the tools we've used in the past. The technical advisory group that we have formed is about a group of 25 multidisciplinary representatives ranging from trauma and healthcare professionals, fire and law enforcement professionals, city attorney. We have like a large and a medium and a small size city represented, including the city of Vista from the Vision Zero Action Plan Partnership, safety and active transportation advocates, social services, a lot of different folks from different realms of safety, and can provide really good perspective as we develop the networks, both for the high injury network, the active transportation network, and to give us some great feedback on the effectiveness of our public engagement strategies. And so we'll be meeting with that group roughly quarterly, and it'll allow us to get even deeper into kind of assessing the analysis and the methods that we're using to come up with the network and get some really great feedback, focused feedback from that group of professionals that we honestly hardly get to really reach or talk to in either forums like this or out in the public. So it provides us kind of a focused environment to have those discussions. And then as far as next steps are concerned, here's our kind of high level outlook for both plans and the products that we'll be putting out. The high injury network is going to be the first at the top of the list later this year, fall, maybe winter, to complete that high injury network. So we'll be really interested to see what percentage of roadways and where are accounting for that highest majority of fatalities and severe injuries. Continue with additional data analysis to help inform the Vision Zero Action Plan and the Regional Active Transportation Network development, so that by spring next year, we can have a draft Regional Active Transportation Network to share with everyone and get feedback on that to improve on it even more. By the end of the fiscal year, the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan, that safety plan, is needing to be complete so that the agency can apply, if we'd like to, for implementation dollars through the Safe Streets for All grant program Sam described. And we'll be continuing various types of stakeholder outreach throughout the calendar year of 2024. And that concludes our presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We do have one, the original draw. You can go ahead when you're ready.
Man, like I was just saying, I mean, we'll never be going to zero. And then as we're sitting here talking about safety, I really don't understand why we're not bringing up the unsafeness of these lithium batteries that are totally combustible. In fact, you know, like I was talking about the place in China with all of them just sitting there. If all of those lit on fire because they can just from fumes, that's a fire you can't put out. We already have the, you know, fire departments, you know, concerned about this. Even the city of San Diego had an item that they were talking about the dangers of these, but then they still want to use them. The concern was more about losing trash trucks and having to spend $2 million to replace trash trucks, even though they know that all of these scooters, these electric bikes, all of the fleet of EV, you know, transportation for shuttles, whatever it is, even these buses. I don't know if you haven't seen any kind of footage of that or done any research into it, but it's pretty terrifying to watch and think that we're putting people on all of these types of ways to travel around. And we're talking about safety, but it's like we're totally ignoring the fact that those are like bombs. And that is, if you get into a wreck on the road, like, I mean, somebody hit me who was drunk and high on PCP. And I can't imagine if I was in an electric vehicle or if he was, that accident would have been way worse. We probably both would have perished because of the impact. And it's just like, how do you can't even put those fires out. So I just don't understand how we can sit and talk about, you know, safety and, you know, fatalities and driving, but then we ignore, you know, the biggest problem that we're forcing, because if it was gas cars that were doing this, I mean, people would be like, get those off the road. But instead, we're just kind of overlooking all of these things and, you know, encouraging it and actually incentivizing people to get into these bombs. I really don't understand it. And I mean, besides that, even just for the environment, they're unsafe, like I've told you. But I just don't understand how we think that, you know, a bunch of kids riding bikes with their family, like when they're riding as a family, it's like a line. You got your parents in front and then the kids behind. So you're not even staying in a close connected area, which actually leaves your children up to be hit by a car if they're not paying attention. And if they're behind, you know, like, I just don't, or even elderly people, like we're expecting people to do all this stuff. I don't know if you guys have ever been handicapped, but I was paralyzed for 8 years. So I know what it's like to be in a wheelchair and have to, you know, get around that way. And what you guys are doing is not something that's conducive to all people. It's actually really messed up, especially when you talk about safety. And this has nothing, I mean, you can't even provide a safe option. It makes no sense. It's totally negligent.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Francesca. Okay, we'll bring it back to committee members. Do we have any member comments or questions for staff?
A whole bunch, but everybody else.
Les?
I just have one before Stephanie starts with her whole five. So this is probably for you, Sam. You had a graphic up there on statewide fatalities, and it was like 3,500 or something like that. And then after that, you showed the SCAG high injury network that we're working on for San Diego. And I was curious if we know out of that statewide graphic, what percentage is in the San Diego region? You know, do we have that info?
Yeah, I can give you an approximation right now, and I can follow up with the more numeric answer. But in general, our population is about 8.4% of the statewide population, and our fatalities is slightly lower than that. So we're usually around a few decimal points, like 8% of the state.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Sunny, please.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, SANDAG, for taking on this whole topic as far as safety is concerned. That was something that we talked about and implemented through the triennial audit program. But I think it's very important for SANDAG to take leadership in this area like other MPOs have. So glad you're doing that. City of San Diego Vision Zero, I noticed it was not on your list of partners. I thought they had a Vision Zero program. So why is it, being the biggest city in this region, they're not necessarily, you're not following or utilizing any of what they have developed?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. So the partners that we listed on that slide were particular for that grant source, the Safe Streets and Roads for All, and that's to develop a Vision Zero action plan. And the city of San Diego has theirs already. So we do work with them, we coordinate with them, and we're learning from their lessons as well.
Okay.
We also have their staff on our technical advisory group, so they're able to participate and we're able to learn from their experience in that realm as well.
Okay. Okay, so they will be, do they have any components that would be beneficial for the SANDAG plan?
Yeah, we'll be, as we advance through ours, and I should say that they're also doing an update to their Vision Zero action plan where they're bringing in some equity elements as well. So we're kind of learning together as we work through those processes. They have their high injury network. We're going to look at, since we're at a different scale, there might be elements that we can take inspiration from. It's a nice way to put, like, take their ideas. But at a different scale, we might have to tweak them a little bit.
Okay. So my first job at Caltrans was to study accidents and facilities. And I'm sure Pedro and everybody that worked for Caltrans knows that. So they have it down to a science as far as what you can do to the facility or what improvements may be needed in order to reduce the number of accidents. So they have a very good system in place because of the reporting of all those accidents through Highway Patrol. And there's a whole database, and, you know, that's what I did. I went out there in the street and looked at, you know, the guardrails or whatever else was necessary to find out what was it that caused, if anything, related to the facilities. So I don't know how you can implement something like that regionally, or how you get your accident data to be able, do you have any ideas at this point as to how you can collect that information, and how would you implement something like that to make sure facilities are safe?
Yeah, I can run through what we're anticipating to do. And then as we go through this discovery process of, you know, the what data is truly available and the accuracy of it and the countermeasures or the safety solutions. So the approach is, and it's a little bit different than maybe an accident reconstruction, where those that are participating in that kind of effort are able to see a narrative of what the responding officers describe as far as the preceding events. We're not getting to that level of detail. We're taking the statewide integrated traffic record system, or SWITRs, and that has 70 fields. It's a bunch of related tables that go through all the parties of a crash and describe what their preceding action was, what the weather was, if the road was wet or dry, the lighting, if there's any potential contributing factors to it, the crash type. So there's a lot of data there, and that's what the data source that primarily we'll be using for this effort. And with that, we're anticipating to be able to identify a menu of safety solutions, because each jurisdiction, they're the owners of the facilities. And so if there is a potential safety solution for a particular area, we are going to develop a kind of a menu of options. When you have this, on this portion of the high injury network, as an example, here are 3 safety solutions that could work. And then depending on the context of that area, that jurisdiction can say, hey, of these 3, we like option B, and move forward with that one. but we want to make sure that we provide that option and also include information about like what the anticipated crash reduction factor would be for those different countermeasures included in those recommendations.
Okay, so that statewide data that you referred to, is that from the DMV reporting of accidents, or do you know? I mean, I want to know because jurisdictions, I don't know if it reports everything up or is it certain things that are missed? How would you know you have comprehensive data?
So for this one, this data set is from what they call a triple nickel. The 555 report is what an officer fills out when they are on scene of a crash.
Okay.
And so whether it would be San Diego Police Department or Escondido Police Department, they fill out the same form statewide. And then they submit those to CHP, and then CHP enters them into a database. And that's part of the reason there's a 2-year lag between when we have an incident and when we get the final data. Some of these are still handwritten reports. And then if they're handwritten, sometimes they are faxed to CHP and somebody at CHP has to then type that back in. So there are potential errors that creep into the system, and we're looking at opportunities to help this region get as accurate as possible of data. But as far as is everything covered in every crash? No. But we feel we're confident in that it's a good data set. It is the best data set we can use. We know for rural areas, there is underreporting. Anecdotally, we've heard evidence of people being in injury crashes, but they're in such a remote area that they're able to kind of self-extract themselves from that situation or call a friend or family member and then go to the hospital. Since an officer did not arrive on scene, there's no report of it. It won't be in that data set. So we're looking at other opportunities. Maybe it is hospital records, working with the County Department of Health, looking at near miss data or automated connected vehicle data. So we're looking at other opportunities, and that's part of the scope of the Vision Zero Action Plan to see if there's other opportunities. So for our rural area and our tribal partners, this is a concern.
Very good. So for SANDAG to implement a region-wide safety program, and I don't know if there is any authority needed, additional authority needed to make that happen. It's also a little bit of enforcement as far as making sure jurisdictions follow through and improving if there are any improvements needed. Do you need any additional legislation or any difference or board decisions to be able to actually be the lead agency for safety?
I guess it would depend on the type of program. And I see there'll probably be several layers of different program. And we will be looking at policies as well. And there are certain policies at the state level that SANDAG does not have kind of purview or it's not our charge to handle those. But we do want to work with our state partners to encourage them in realms of safety. So that is another element we want to stay in tune with, and that'll become more common practice for SANDAG to be involved in those conversations. On the program side, an example of one that we've seen that I personally think has been very profound in again, borrowing from the example of the Southern California Association of Governments for LA and surrounding counties, is they have a Go Human campaign, and that they've been successful in leveraging a grant source from the Office of Traffic Safety to then develop kind of a mini grant program for communities to develop their own small safety solutions. It might be like a high visibility crosswalk that then has colors and art associated with it that brings in the history of the community. So it's both a community gathering, art, and safety all together. And so they've been able to leverage that kind of program. That's another idea, but we need to really explore all the ideas through this process. But it's a great question on if there's additional legislation that is needed or opportunities. We'll have to discover that through this process. And so I hope to come back and be able to present on that too.
That's great. And just one thing, I've always worked for large companies where safety culture was very important. As an organization, I think it's important for SANDAG to adopt a safety culture within, the team members as well. I don't know if you practice that, but there's a lot of things can be done educationally for team members. When you all have a safety culture and safety in mind, makes it a lot easier to be the lead agency for safety. So something to keep in mind. I did it at Caltrans. Everybody was aware of what safety was and how important it was to be, like, if you're in construction, to make sure you have, you're following through with all the safety requirements. And then with large companies, because they're exposed to so much liability, they all had these safety training and, mindset and things like that. So I think if you don't have that internally, that should be part of this whole program, to create an internal safety culture as well. So I have one more comment from Marissa. Sorry, I told you I had a bunch of comments. So when you're doing your public outreach for the active transportation, I know you mentioned there's a lot of different things you will do, but I think it's important to also make sure everyone understands why it's important to have an active transportation program. We get public comments that don't really realize that, there's multimodal transportation facilities are needed, and everyone has a different need for transportation. So I'm glad you're covering those that can't drive and, and all that. But I think in your, public outreach, an educational element of the why should really be also mentioned, because it's important to spend money on all types of transportation to meet the needs of everyone that uses the system, not just those that drive. So hope that's part of your program as well. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Yes, Les.
Sorry, I have one more, and I didn't want to interrupt Sunny. She was on a roll with all those. But Sam, this is back for you. I would think these days that a disproportional amount of accidents are starting to occur due to people texting while they're driving. I had a work colleague that was run over 2 years ago, so it's very close to home for me. And I'm wondering if that triple nickel or SWITR data that you're getting, will it dig down enough to give us that amount of accidents that are occurring because of that?
One of the fields includes distracted driving. It doesn't get into specifics about what the distracted driving is, if it's cell phone use or, helping a small child in the back seat. There's lots of different distractions that are occurring in our cars. But we do have that element to it. But that is something else we can look at, kind of alternative data sets to see if there's other opportunities to suss that out. We have heard that in the past about distracted driving, particularly with technology, how that fits into the safety frame.
Thank you.
Pedro.
Sam, great presentation, both of you, actually. On the slide where you have the regional highway entry network, I would suggest that under the next to the last bullet where you say prioritize list of projects, programs, and policies, that you shift that to policies, programs, and projects. And the reason for that is if you create the culture first, then the program will come and then the projects will come your way. Another thought, knowing the little bit that I know in reference to how the accident reports get filled out, yes, they're supposed to all be standardized, but to an extent, you have a lot of turnover in the police departments, and they don't get the most current training, and then your accident reports are not as detailed as they should. Maybe there could be an opportunity for you to provide grants for that training and new technologies to the police departments, so that instead of doing all of this handwritten, it can be done on some sort of a tablet or medium that they already have. Just a thought. Marisa, one of the things that concerns me about the active transportation is that it seems that we're all competing for the same amount of real estate. And it shouldn't be that way. It should not. One of the biggest criticisms that I hear when I go out and about is like, you take the implementation of some of the bicycle lanes. And from the bicyclist point of view, great, awesome. From the driver point of view, you just took away a lane or parking that I had. From the business owner, they get mad and become really vocal because you took away parking. And sometimes maybe what we need to do is look at, why can't that bike lane be on a parallel street adjacent to, but not in that location? And make sure that you engage the business community. When I saw your circle of who's engaged, I didn't see them. And you need to get them on board, because you're modifying their livelihood. And in a way, whether it's positive or negative, you're modifying it. So take that into account, and I have no other comments.
Thank you, Pedro. I have a couple questions and comments. So, Sam, can you explain? I mean, we have these, these long-range planning documents, which I think is a great exercise, a very important exercise. How does that relate to, capital improvements, implementation? What are the interrelationship between, you have a Vision Zero action plan, you're going to have policies and programs there. How does that actually filter down into a City of San Diego bike project, for example?
Good question. I think you started out with that good framework, or this Vision Zero action plan is this guidance document. It is kind of setting where we want to go for jurisdictions to kind of use as direction. Within it, much of the purpose of this particular Vision Zero action plan is to enable eligibility for funding of implementation. So for projects that will be listed in this Vision Zero action plan, jurisdictions can then go to Safe Streets and Roads for All grant applications. And when they're asked to say, specify where this exists, where this project already exists in a qualifying plan, they'll be able to point to this plan. So that's kind of the first step that they have to go through for eligibility to even apply. So then they can actually go through the application process. So some jurisdictions already have safety projects already identified, and they're just queuing up, waiting to try and find the funding that they're able to access. So this new funding source of Safe Streets and Roads for All, it is $1 billion a year nationwide for 5 years. We're currently in the second fiscal year of it, so we're trying to finalize to be eligible, or have the region eligible for the third fiscal cycle. And that'll leave 2 more after that. In addition to Safe Streets and Roads for All, kind of the main fund source for capital improvement and safety is the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And that is managed by Caltrans. So jurisdictions, if they have a project specific they want to leverage, they have to go through a competitive process and show kind of a benefit cost ratio. For this plan, we'll have some of that information, but the jurisdictions will have to do additional work. But they'll essentially have some identifying, okay, this is what we should advance. This is the most compelling project. And so they can take that information from this plan and start working on their Highway Safety Improvement Program application. And there's also some set-asides that the Caltrans safety team has started setting up within that Highway Safety Improvement Program for systemic safety. So things that we know work well and are fairly low cost, they have set-asides for those, so jurisdictions can apply, and that's not as competitive. They don't have to do a BC ratio or benefit cost ratio, which is a significant challenge. Some of these benefit cost ratios that they're looking for are like 17-to-1, or they're significantly high. So unfortunately, for some of those projects, you have to have a facility that has had 1 or more fatalities in order to even get into that realm of that benefit cost ratio.
Thank you. That makes sense. So it seems like focusing on this high injury network, this data really will guide the projects that could potentially be included in the plan. So we're going to look at, where those incidents are occurring, and, potentially working with these jurisdictions to incorporate into this plan potential projects, just focused on those areas where these incidents have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I would, encourage you to focus on those HIN areas. It sounds like that's the first thing you're doing, which is wonderful. And now to the extent that local jurisdictions have this data, they understand where these accidents are occurring, they can analyze local conditions and say, okay, on this particular intersection, we need a high visibility crosswalk or a hot crossing or complete streets, sort of a road diet in order to reduce speed. And that's kind of my second comment is it seems like, most fatalities are they're speed related. Seems like that's kind of the number one factor. So would it be as part of a program, as part of your Vision Zero action plan, would it be possible to create, I know lots of local jurisdictions do complete streets manuals. Where I live in the city of La Mesa, we just had one come to the Planning Commission recently. And, the city of San Diego has their own street design manual, and every jurisdiction tends to have their own street design manuals. But could SANDAG create within a program within Vision Zero to say, we're going to create a regional street design manual based on safety. And then to the extent that, you're looking for local streets and roads funding, we're going to require that you use, these cross sections in this street design manual to say, for example, if you want your travel lanes to be 15 feet wide, we know that that's probably a width that's going to encourage very high speed. And we would rather you make them 10 or 11 or something like that. Would that be an appropriate sort of program to include in the Vision Zero action plan?
I think we'll have a recommendation similar to something like that, where we can look at regional ideas for roadway and facility design. It would be a significant lift to get that regional wide buy-off, but that is definitely one of many kind of programs we want to evaluate through this process. And whether that goes through LSI or local roads and streets process, that would be determined in future efforts.
Yeah, great. And just thinking about the kind of carrots and sticks that SANDAG has, the tools that we have available to us to encourage of course, can't mandate that any jurisdiction, makes their streets safer. Hopefully they would want to do that. But, we do have TransNet dollars, in LSI funds, which is a substantial portion. And so if we had a policy here at SANDAG that if you're going to, your congestion relief dollars at that 70% amount, those congestion relief funds, if you're doing street improvements with those, you have to be incorporating safety features from our Vision Zero action plan into those projects, or you're not going to be eligible for funding. That seems a very, logical way to, have that carrot to incentivize jurisdictions to make their streets safer.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that in addition to considering providing that type of resource, SANDAG's well known for providing as many resources as we can to encourage our local jurisdictions to do a wide variety of things to help meet our transportation goals. We need to pay attention to what existing national resources already exist. For example, NACTO resources. Chris Cluth behind me will tell you all day about how our facilities, bikeway facilities that we plan and build, abide by those all ages and ability standards that NACTO puts forward. We need to be encouraging and incentivizing as many ways as possible to get our local jurisdictions to be on board, to do the same things you're describing with regards to using TransNet dollars to do those types of facilities. And so it's an opportunity maybe for us to compile and suggest ways where those street design manuals that each city is adopting make sure to include verbiage that really helps put the movement of people and the protection of people first. Because there's a lot of inconsistencies in those manuals with how it describes the movement of people and priority. And there's little changes that can be codified and can be consistent throughout all the local jurisdictions, maybe with SANDAG taking the lead and encouraging and guiding them through that process to make those changes.
Thank you.
Jonathan, if
yes.
I may, just to add, Marisa is absolutely right. I would say all of the cities, although they do have their own set of design standards, they all abide by a national or state or a regional set of standards that they all participate in. They don't really develop their own standards per se. Most likely, if they have a very unique situation, they'll deviate on something, but not overall. So keep that in mind. And they're right, they're really good at providing resources that are available instead of guiding. That would be a better approach, I think.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No, seeing none. Thank you both so much for your presentation. I appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to item 8 today.
Chair, I don't think we took public comment on that item. Did we?
Yeah, we
Okay,
did.
my apologies then. Just
No
want to make sure we're
problem. Thank you for keeping us honest on that,
Sure.
Francesca. So we'll move on to item number 8, which is the fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2021 TransNet triennial performance audits, the implementation status. And we are going to be hearing from Zara. Good morning, Zara.
Good morning, Chair Franco, and good morning, ITALK members. This item, item number 8, is an update on the implementation status of the recommendations from the 2 most recent triennial performance audits. And those are for FY 2018 and 2021 audits. The ITALK conducts the performance audits every 3 years using the services of an independent performance auditor. And those are mainly to review project delivery, cost control, and schedule adherence and related activities, and to make recommendations that would help the effectiveness and efficiency of the expenditure of TransNet ordinance, TransNet revenues. The FY 2021 performance audit concluded that SANDAG completed many major quarter projects as intended in the TransNet ordinance. In addition, the audit found that SANDAG was generally in compliance with the TransNet provisions. FY 2018 performance audit mostly found SANDAG and its TransNet partners were on track toward meeting TransNet primary goals. Both the FY 2018 and 2021 performance audit had included 26 recommendations each, and they were categorized based on ranking of high, critical, high, and medium and low priority based on the impact they have on the TransNet program goals. I'm sorry, and SANDAG responsibilities. Up to this point, 11 recommendations of FY 2021 performance audits have been completed, and regarding the FY 2018, there were 16 recommendations that have been completed, and 4 have been partially completed. The remaining recommendations for both FY 2018 and 2021 are in the process of being addressed and are anticipated to be completed at the conclusion of the current FY 2024 audit. And that concludes our presentation, and the staff is available to answer any question that the ITALK members may have.
Thank you so much, Zara. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. No hands from the public.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to committee members. Questions or comments for Zara on implementation status, performance audit implementation status? Yes, Sunny.
Thank you for the update. This massive spreadsheet is getting bigger and bigger, but it's good to see the actual updates on that. The only thing I suggest, and you've done it in most cases with the update, you've provided a timeline, which is really important. But in some cases, there was no timeline. So I just want to make sure we kind of know when things are coming. So as an example, item 7B, in July, you said you were negotiating with a software vendor and initiate project. And in October, you're still saying you're still negotiating with the vendor. How long does it take to negotiate with a vendor, or what's kind of really the next step? So if you could be more clear on the timelines and why is it taking 4 months to negotiate with someone?
So I can answer that if you'd like.
Yeah.
This is the vendor that currently provides our services for Project Track for the RTIP. And they are currently working with other staff, so Grace Mino with her side, and then also with our staff to enhance the system as a whole So it's not just adding this component, it's also enhancing the system. And so that has cost more than anticipated and that we currently have budget for.
Okay.
So we are currently negotiating with them. What can we take out? What can we do better? And how can we bring the price down? So that
Okay.
has been going back and forth and I can't quite give you a timeline and maybe by next year's budget that we will have enough budget in order to pay for all of it.
Okay.
But as of right now, that is what we are currently negotiating with them.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Just maybe a little bit more explanation than why is it taking, or you don't need to put the whole thing in there, but just a little bit more clarification would be helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No, seeing none. Zara, thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation. Okay, this concludes item 8, and that concludes all of our report items on the agenda today. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Wednesday, November 8th, here at 9:30 a.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.